Okay, class. So we're in a new time period of literature, 1945 to 1990. This period currently has no real name. Its distinctive features are rapid and diverse change. Basically, after modernism, we see some of those trends hold on. We see everything change very quickly, and we see a lot of different and diverse changes to literature. So you kind of have an explosion here of terminology and stuff to deal with. So let me kind of explain this to you. When you hear me say literary convention, and I will upload this document here, it will be there with the lecture. When you hear me say literary conventions are just like, literature in certain time periods has characteristics, as you've noticed as we've gone along, like modernism. There's, the different techniques that are common to modernism. Those are its literary conventions. So just I wanted to have a definition for you. But the great American novel. Okay, so basically, Hemingway and a lot of those guys, and your examples I have here for you are Gone with the Wind, Huckleberry Finn, and Grapes of Wrath. But the great American novel is kind of considered to be this kind of, everybody wanted to write it. Everybody wanted to write the great American novel to try to capture the essence of America, as you can see here from the definition. So that goes away, and we begin to have it lean towards something else, new, more experimental kinds of writing. Next, we have metafiction. This starts to merge. Metafiction is where the author essentially understands there is an audience and it knows it's very self-aware. You know, um, the work may be about a novelist writing a novel, and the protagonist may even have the same name as the writer. The writer may even talk to the reader in the book. Kind of like the never-ending story or whatever, or like Deadpool. Talking to the audience, breaking the fourth wall essentially. Okay, and it's very open and honest type of work. We also have literary minimalism, and I have a link here for you, uh, which kind of explains, what less is more means. These three characteristics of minimal literature. It's just simple writing, just short, simple, very basic, simple sentences, straightforward plot. Okay, I mean that's essentially all we have. Okay, so that becomes important too. So those terms I just kind of want to hit you with. Okay, influencing factors of this time period in literature. All right, basically we have World War II, and what you guys might not understand about World War II is basically Russia and England and the victorious countries kind of chopped the world up and said, okay, well this is what I'm kind of gonna control or have dominion over. Russia kind of absorbed all these countries, and it's in the east, like Ukraine and stuff like that. It absorbed in a part of the Soviet Union that it had, in the century, and it was trying to fight to hold on to those. Everybody was trying to get control of, basically with World War II. We saw with the fall of Germany that production, being able to produce weaponry and machines and all this stuff is extremely important to winning the war. So you got to have lands where you can get the stuff you need to do that, especially stuff to make nuclear bombs and big explosions. So all these kind of countries in Africa and Asia, that could be mined for these things became very, very, very important. And the idea of kind of absorbing third world countries and getting control of them became very important. You probably don't want to hear it, but basically we divided up the world to see who got to run what, basically. And it was a scramble to see who could get the most between the powers that emerged. And it ends up America emerged on top because Russia had problems with their economy, and Britain, had just been, in a devastating war, but we were way over here. So we kind of remained unscathed besides the people we sent to fight the war. All right. And right after World War II comes this era of conformity. Now, you can't understand how strict it was, but in America, you better be you should be white. That's the ideal. You better be Christian. and you better behave a certain way. For instance, you guys, like on TV, you couldn't even show a married couple sleeping in the same bed. They had to have separate beds. Things were that strict, right? And we were trying to really fight the idea of communism and socialism from Russia and Russian propaganda. So we kind of really pushed hard this idea of this is what it's like to be American. For instance, if you were a guy, you could only have two haircuts. There were only two haircuts allowed at the time. Anyways, so then all of a sudden you have a technology boom because of World War II. You have space exploration, TV, and increase in wealth and economy. People moved out to the suburbs. And then you had the civil rights movement, and women had been had been in the workforce because of World War II, and then you had men who were minorities that fought in the war and they came back, especially black men, and said, "Well, why should I be treated like a second class citizen when I'm over here fighting and dying for you?" And they wanted equality. And then you had other people like Native Americans and all these other people who wanted equality too. There was people don't talk about civil rights also being about women's rights to be in the workforce and gay rights, and there was a bunch of other stuff that went along with that too. And you also had, for the first time, massive distrust in the government starts up with the Vietnam War. And people just do not trust the government anymore because some of these politicians had openly lied. And I'm not going to go into a big political thing with Nixon and Vietnam and stuff like that. But, there's a reason why it was extremely controversial war. And so basically what happens is you have the idea of the death of the novel, that the novels had become too conformist, and you have just an explosion of change. So basically, what it all boils down to is the important part of this lecture: the characteristics of literature from 1945 to 1990. Okay, if you have regionalism now, there is an extreme change in regionalism. Um, you know, um, an extreme change in regionalism. Sorry, trying to do two things at once. If there is regionalism used in literature at this time, it's got to provide some kind of deeper meaning to the work. Symbolism, theme, your understanding the work, all that's got to be key. It just can't be about the place anymore. The place has to be tied into the themes. A good example of this would be like A Rose for Emily, right? Um, you also have like new journalism. And in new journalism, nonfiction and creative nonfiction, metafiction rise up. So nonfiction is basically like you take, it's almost imagine journalism writing, just the facts, but you start to apply literary techniques to those facts, characterization, symbolism, metaphor, imagery, and also you try to avoid absolute objectivity, and it's very subjective. And the writer puts his or her self and experiences, allows them to color the work and the understanding of what's going on at the time. You also have metafiction, which is like nonfiction, but can even be extremely more creative, can even use outright lies and exaggeration if the goal is to kind of expose the truth of a situation. And a good example of that would be Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, or for instance, um, The Things They Carried, which is considered one of the greatest Vietnam War, writings and stuff, that has been done ever. Tim O'Brien is the name of that character, and I'll add that in a second. Also, another characteristic of this time period is minimalism, where it refers to, essentially, you have stuff that's highly experimental. Here, sorry, I should have typed this earlier. You have stuff that's highly experimental in very new and surprising ways. You know, um, all kinds of things, themes, subjects, style, all that stuff. There's just explosion of experimentalism, and you also have minimalism, where you have essentially very very simple, basic, simple plots, simple characters, and you have to figure out what's going on. Also, like I said, it becomes highly experimental. You have a highly experimental literature in an infinite amount of ways. I mean, you saw how E. Cummings had changed in some of this stuff, and um, sorry, hold on one second. You saw how E. Cummings have been so experimental with, she being brand new. So you can see these changes that are coming. So that's what I mean here. I mean, it's like there's all kinds of experimentation all over the place, all different kinds. There's too many to write down here. I mean, it is literally an explosion of change. And you also have some new ethnic writing. And by new ethnic writing, I mean you have Jewish authors, Southern authors, African American authors. You have an explosion of writers writing about ethnicity as well. So let me just type that for you. All right. So again, you have an explosion of writers writing about their ethnic identity and ethnic experience. And these are the main characteristics of this time period, and I hope that is helpful.